The evening of June 5, 2010, was unusually warm, even for Georgia. The humid air, saturated with the scent of magnolias and jasmine, enveloped the suburbs of Atlanta in a thick veil. The sun slowly sank below the horizon, painting the sky above Milton in shades of peach and lavender. There was no indication that this ordinary summer evening would forever change the life of an entire city. Deborah Parker, a 22-year-old senior psychology major at the University of Georgia, was getting ready to go to a party at her friend Samantha Wilson's house in Roswell, a small town 15 minutes from campus. That evening, Deborah wore her favorite blue dress, which her mother had given her for her birthday a month earlier. She was so happy that day, recalls Margaret Parker, Deborah's mother, looking at the last photo of her daughter taken before she left. She had just finished her last exam of the semester and was full of plans for the summer. She was going to do an internship at a clinic for children with developmental disabilities. She always wanted to help others. The smartphone camera captured a smiling girl with long brown hair and bright green eyes full of hope for the future, a future she would never have. At 9 p.m., Deborah sent her parents a message saying she had arrived at Samantha's house. According to witnesses, it was a small party, about 15 people, mostly classmates and friends from university. There was not much alcohol, a few bottles of wine and beer. The music was played quietly so as not to disturb the neighbors. Deborah didn't drink that night, recalls Samantha Wilson, the missing woman's best friend. She was driving and rarely drank alcohol anyway. We just danced, laughed, and discussed our plans for the summer. Nothing out of the ordinary. But around 11 p.m., Deborah received a text message that made her frown. She stepped aside to reply, then returned to her friends and said she needed to leave for a moment. She would be back soon. I asked if everything was okay, Samantha continues, struggling to hold back tears. She said yes, she just needed to meet someone for a little while. She seemed a little nervous, but not scared. She promised to be back in an hour at most. I offered to go with her, but she said she could handle it herself. If only I had insisted. That was the last time anyone saw Deborah Parker alive. At midnight, when Deborah had not returned and was not answering her phone or messages, Samantha became concerned and called her friend's parents. James and Margaret Parker immediately contacted the police, but received the standard response. They had to wait 24 hours to report an adult missing. Not wanting to waste any time, they began searching for her themselves. I knew something had happened, says James Parker, Deborah's father, a retired military man. My daughter never turned off her phone. She never disappeared without warning. She was responsible and organized. This was completely out of character for her. On June 6th, at 6 a.m., Deborah's car, a silver Honda Civic, was found by a patrol officer on the side of Old Milton Highway, about 10 kilometers from Samantha's home. The car doors were unlocked, the keys were in the ignition, and Deborah's purse with her documents and money was on the passenger seat. The radio was still on. Detective Richard Collins, the first to arrive at the scene, immediately noticed some alarming signs. There were signs of a struggle on the driver's door, scratches, bits of skin under the fingernails, as if someone had tried to hold on. On the asphalt next to the car, we found a broken heel from a shoe belonging to Deborah and a few drops of blood. An analysis of Deborah's phone, found in the car, showed that the last message came from an unknown number registered to a prepaid phone purchased with cash at a store 30 kilometers from Milton. The message was brief. Need your help. Meet me at the old water tower. Please come alone. It's urgent. By noon on June 6th, the Milton Police Department had officially launched an investigation into Deborah Parker's disappearance. A search party of 50 officers and over 100 local volunteers was organized. Air patrols with helicopters scanned the area around the water tower and the surrounding wooded areas. The town rallied instantly, recalls Fulton County Sheriff Michael Jenkins. I've never seen such unity. People took time off work and canceled plans to join the search. Everyone knew the Parkers. James coached a children's baseball team. Margaret worked at the local library. Deborah grew up here. and everyone knew her as a bright, friendly girl. On the evening of June 7th, the search party found the first significant clue. In the woods, about a kilometer from the water tower, Deborah's personal belongings were found in thick undergrowth: a broken bracelet that she never took off, a gift from her grandmother, and one blue shoe with a broken heel, a match to the one found near the car. "When I saw that bracelet, my heart stopped," says Margaret Parker. "She got it for her 16th birthday from my mother, who died a year later. Deborah swore she would never take it off. I realized that she had fought, resisted. My brave girl fought to the end." At the site where the items were found, forensic investigators found signs of a struggle: crushed grass, broken branches, traces of blood on leaves. Analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to Deborah. Tire tracks were found nearby that did not match Deborah's car, but the rain that had fallen the night before washed away most of the evidence. By the end of the first week of the search, the atmosphere in Milton had changed. The initial concern had turned into real fear. Parents stopped letting their children go out unsupervised. Women refused to leave their homes after dark. Local authorities imposed a temporary curfew on minors. Every lamppost and shop window was plastered with photos of a smiling Deborah with the word "missing" and a hotline number. It was like a heavy blanket of fear covering the entire city, recalls Milton's mayor at the time, Robert Hammond. Milton had always been a safe, peaceful place. Many people moved here for that very reason. And then suddenly this happened. People started locking their doors and installing alarms. The trust between neighbors that our city was known for began to crumble. On June 8th, FBI Special Agent Teresa Martinez joined the investigation because there was suspicion that the crime might be related to the victim being transported across state lines. "From the moment I first became involved in the case, I had the feeling that this crime had been carefully planned," Agent Martinez comments. The choice of location, an isolated water tower far from residential areas, the use of a prepaid phone, the fact that the surveillance cameras at the nearest gas station had been disabled the day before the disappearance. Everything pointed to someone who had prepared very carefully. On June 10th, when hope began to fade, the police held a press conference at which Deborah's parents made an emotional appeal to the kidnapper and the public. "Please give us back our daughter," Margaret Parker pleaded tearfully, holding a photo of Deborah in her hands. "She never did anything wrong to anyone. She just wanted to help people. If anyone saw or heard anything, please call the police. And to the person who took our girl, please just let her come home. We won't ask any questions." The press conference was broadcast on all local channels and attracted the attention of the national media. The number of calls to the hotline increased tenfold. The Parker family announced a reward of $50,000 for information leading to Deborah's whereabouts. Among the many false leads and speculations, one piece of evidence caught the investigators' attention. A cashier at a gas station located 3 kilometers from the water tower claimed that at around midnight on June 5th, he saw a dark pickup truck stop for a few minutes and then quickly drove off in the direction of the highway. The surveillance cameras were not working due to a technical malfunction that had occurred the day before, but the witness remembered part of the vehicle's license plate number and described the driver as a middle-aged man wearing a cap and a beard. The police checked all dark pickup trucks with matching license plate numbers registered in the area, but none of them led to a breakthrough in the case. The owners of all the vehicles checked had alibis for the time of Deborah's disappearance. As the days and then weeks passed, the intensity of the search decreased. There were fewer and fewer volunteers. Milton slowly returned to his normal life, albeit with a new, bitter understanding that their quiet suburb would never be the same again. "The worst thing is the uncertainty," admits James Parker, looking at a photo of his daughter on the mantelpiece in his home. "When someone dies, as painful as it is, the process of mourning begins, followed by gradual healing. But when someone disappears, it's an open wound that never heals. Every phone call, every knock on the door, and your heart stops. Could it be news about your child? Could it be that she has finally come home?" At the end of June 2010, the Deborah Parker case was classified as cold. The official search was suspended. Only a small group of detectives continued to work on the investigation in their spare time. By mid-June 2010, the search operation in Milton had reached unprecedented proportions. More than 300 volunteers combed through forests, abandoned buildings, and rural areas within a 30-kilometer radius of Deborah Parker's disappearance. The National Guard provided 2 helicopters with thermal imaging cameras. Divers searched all the bodies of water in the area. Search and rescue dogs worked day and night, trying to pick up the scent of the missing student. "I've never seen such a mobilization for a single person," recalls Search Operation Coordinator Joseph Bradley. People came from neighboring states to help. Local businesses provided volunteers with food and drink. Churches organized prayer vigils. Schools canceled classes so that children and teachers could join the search. Every morning, hundreds of people gathered in the parking lot of the Milton Plaza Shopping Center, where the police handed out maps with designated search areas. Volunteers in groups of 5 to 7 went into the woods, armed with walkie-talkies, compasses, and bottles of water. They returned at sunset, tired, often wet from rain or sweat, empty-handed and heavy-hearted. In the early days, there was hope, says Melissa Clark, a neighbor of the Parkers who participated in the search. "We believed we would find Deborah alive. Maybe she was injured or lost, but alive." With each passing day, that hope faded. After a week of searching, I noticed a change in the conversations. People talked less and less about finding Deborah and more about at least finding her body so her family could bury their daughter. An active investigation was conducted in parallel with the search. Detectives interviewed everyone who had been at Samantha's party, examined Deborah's phone calls and messages over the past few months, and analyzed her activity on social media. The first serious suspect was Brian Walsh, a 25-year-old graduate student with whom Deborah had been dating for about 6 months and had broken up with a month before her disappearance. According to friends, the breakup was difficult. Brian did not want to let Deborah go and tried several times to rekindle the relationship. "He seemed like the perfect suspect," admits Detective Richard Collins. "A rejected guy, known for his hot temper, with no clear alibi for the evening of the disappearance. Cameras recorded his car near the party venue 2 hours before Deborah arrived there." Brian was detained for questioning and spent nearly 36 hours at the police station. He denied any involvement in his ex-girlfriend's disappearance and insisted that he was at home working on his dissertation on the night she disappeared. "Yes, I drove past Samantha's house during the day," he said during the interrogation, which was recorded on video. "I wanted to talk to Deborah and found out she would be at the party, but then I changed my mind. I realized it would look like stalking, so I went home and didn't go out again." His words were initially met with skepticism, but then received unexpected confirmation. A university system administrator discovered that Brian had indeed logged into the university network from his home computer at 11 p.m. on June 5th, the very time Deborah disappeared. He downloaded several articles from the electronic library and sent an email to his research supervisor at midnight. A check of the IP address and metadata confirmed that this could not have been done remotely or using a timer. After Brian's release, the police's attention shifted to Tom Higgins, the owner of the bar where Deborah worked as a waitress. Several witnesses reported that Tom had shown an unhealthy interest in Deborah, despite the significant age difference. He was 47 years old. They were once seen arguing in the parking lot behind the bar. "She was like a daughter to me," Higgins insisted during questioning, rubbing his hands nervously. "Yes, we had an argument once. She wanted to quit, and I was short-staffed. I got a little heated, but I would never hurt her." Higgins' alibi was also confirmed. On the night of Deborah's disappearance, he was at his bar, as attested to by dozens of patrons and CCTV footage. Furthermore, he could not have been the sender of the last message Deborah received. His phone was an older model that did not support the function of hiding the number. By the end of June, the police had checked more than 50 suspects, including Deborah's ex-boyfriends, university professors with questionable reputations, and local residents known to the police with convictions for violent crimes. All of them were excluded from the list of suspects because they had alibis or no motive. A major breakthrough in the investigation came when FBI agent Teresa Martinez, analyzing unsolved crimes in neighboring counties, discovered an alarming coincidence. Over the previous 5 years, 2 young women had disappeared under similar circumstances. Christina Ellis, 20, a student at Ogthorpe College, disappeared in 2007 in Cherokee County, about 40 kilometers from Milton, Agent Martinez said, laying out photos on the table. And Ashley Donovan, 23, a nurse, disappeared in 2008 in Forsyth. Both young, attractive, with brown hair. Both disappeared in the evening after meeting with friends. In both cases, their cars were found with their personal belongings inside. And in both cases, they received messages requesting an urgent meeting before their disappearance. This discovery forced investigators to rethink their approach. If all 3 cases were connected, then it could be a serial kidnapper, carefully selecting his victims and operating according to a well-established pattern. The most alarming thing is the increasing frequency of crimes, notes criminal psychologist Dr. Lawrence Fisher, who was brought in to assist with the investigation. The first known kidnapping was in 2007. The next one was 16 months later, then 15 months later. If we are dealing with a serial offender, his cooling off periods between crimes are getting shorter, which is typical for the escalation of such behavior. The police forces of 3 counties joined forces to search for connections between the victims. It turned out that all 3 girls frequented the same North Point Mall in Alpharetta, located approximately the same distance from the places of their disappearance. Christina Ellis worked part-time at a bookstore there. Ashley Donovan regularly visited the mall's fitness club, and Deborah Parker often met friends at a local coffee shop. However, this lead proved insufficient. Thousands of people visited the mall every day, and the CCTV systems only stored recordings for a maximum of 30 days, making it impossible to analyze the video footage from the periods prior to Christina and Ashley's disappearances. In early July, when the intensity of the search began to decline, Deborah's parents decided to take a desperate step. They organized a press conference on national television, which was broadcast in prime time across the country. "Our daughter is an amazing person," James Parker said with a trembling voice, holding his wife's hand. She dreamed of becoming a child psychologist, helping children who had experienced trauma. In high school, she volunteered at an animal shelter. Every Christmas, she collected gifts for children from low-income families. "Please help us find her," Margaret Parker, struggling to hold back tears, added. "We are increasing the reward to $100,000. This money will go to anyone who provides information that helps find our daughter. We are not interested in punishing the guilty. We just want Deborah back home, alive, or to bury her with dignity. Please." The televised appeal prompted a new wave of calls to the hotline, more than 1,000 in the first day. Most of them did not contain useful information, but a few caught the attention of investigators. 2 independent witnesses reported seeing a strange, dark pickup truck parked near the party location on the night of Deborah's disappearance. One witness even noticed a man sitting behind the wheel, apparently watching Samantha's house. "He looked out of place," recalled the witness, 43-year-old Gary Simmons, who lives across the street from the Wilsons. "A grown man in an area where students were gathering. I thought maybe it was someone's father coming to pick up their child. But he just sat there, not getting out of the car." The description of the man was too vague, middle-aged, baseball cap, possibly a beard, to create an accurate portrait. The witness did not remember the car's license plate number. Nevertheless, it was the first hint that Deborah might have been the victim of a carefully planned abduction rather than a spontaneous crime. Another important piece of evidence came from a gas station employee in Forsyth who claimed to have seen Ashley Donovan with a middle-aged man shortly before her disappearance in 2008. According to her, the man was well-dressed, polite, and called Ashley by name, giving the impression that they knew each other. The description of this man partially matched the vague portrait of the man in the pickup truck, medium height, with a neat beard, aged around 40 to 50. By mid-July, despite all efforts, the investigation had begun to stall. Search operations were officially suspended. Most of the volunteers returned to their normal lives. The media gradually lost interest in the story. That's the harsh reality of law enforcement, Sheriff Michael Jenkins admits. The longer a person remains missing, the less chance there is of finding them alive. The further away from the time of the crime, the colder the trail. We have other cases and limited resources. We can't keep 30 detectives on one investigation indefinitely, as much as I would like to. By August 2010, the active phase of the investigation had ended. The Deborah Parker case was officially classified as cold. Only 2 detectives, Richard Collins and his partner Susan Chen, continued to work on it in their spare time. The Parker family refused to give up. They created a website dedicated to finding their daughter, regularly updated information posters throughout the city, and appeared monthly in the local media, reminding the public that their daughter was still missing. The worst thing is the silence, says Margaret Parker, looking at her daughter's empty room, preserved exactly as it was on the day Deborah disappeared. Not knowing what happened, whether she's alive, whether she's suffering. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I think I hear her voice. I run to her room, but no one is there. It's the cruelest torture to live with this uncertainty. Autumn in Georgia always comes unnoticed. First, there is a subtle chill in the morning, then a gradual change in the color of the leaves, from rich green to golden and crimson hues. For most Milton residents, the fall of 2010 was no different from previous ones. But for the Parker family, time seemed to have stopped on June 5th. I remember looking at the calendar in October, says Margaret Parker, sitting in the living room of her home, where every surface is decorated with photos of Deborah. 4 months had passed. People were returning to their normal lives. The news was reporting on other events. But for us, every day was June 5th. Every morning I woke up thinking, maybe today we'll find our girl. When the official investigation reached a dead end, the Parker family decided to take matters into their own hands. In November 2010, they established the Deborah Parker Memorial Fund, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping families of missing persons. With money raised from the sale of James's house in Atlanta and donations from local residents, the fund began its work. We realized that we were not alone in our pain, says James Parker. Thousands of people disappear every year in the United States. Many families do not have the resources to conduct their own searches, pay for private investigators, or organize information campaigns. We decided to use Deborah's tragedy to help others. The foundation provided financial support for printing posters and flyers about missing persons, paid for private investigators, organized volunteer search teams, and provided psychological support to the families of the missing. Particular attention was paid to cases involving young women between the ages of 18 and 25, the category to which Deborah belonged. Working at the foundation became a way for me to survive, Margaret admits. Every time we helped find a missing person, alive or otherwise, it gave us hope that one day we would learn the truth about Deborah. On June 5, 2011, the first anniversary of Deborah's disappearance, the Parker family organized a memorial event in Milton's Central Park. More than 300 people gathered in the evening with lit candles. They sang songs that Deborah loved, shared memories of her, and prayed for her return. Since then, these gatherings have become an annual tradition. A lot of people came the first year, recalls Samantha Wilson, Deborah's best friend. The second year, about half as many. By the 5th anniversary, only her closest friends and relatives remained. That's natural, I understand. Life goes on for everyone, except those who have lost a loved one. Over time, a rift developed in the Milton community. Some residents continued to actively support the Parker family, participated in the foundation's events, posted informational posters in their stores and offices, and donated money. Others sought to forget the tragedy, believing that constant reminders of the crime negatively affected the city's reputation and the psychological state of its residents, especially children. "We all sympathize with the Parker family," says Rebecca Thompson, a member of the Milton City Council since 2012. "But you can't turn the whole city into a memorial. Tourists have stopped coming to us. Real estate prices have fallen. Parents are afraid to let their children go outside. Some have even moved away because of it. Milton has always been known as a safe place to live, and now we've become the town of the missing girl." Tensions peaked in 2014 when a group of business people tried to get a court order restricting the placement of posters with Deborah's photo in public places. The lawsuit was dismissed, but relations between the two groups of residents remained tense. All this time, detectives Richard Collins and Susan Chen continued to work on the case. Every few months, they reviewed the investigation materials, re-interviewed key witnesses, and tested new technologies that could help analyze the available evidence. "Cold cases have their own specific characteristics," explains Detective Chen. "Sometimes years go by, and suddenly someone decides to reveal what they've known all along. Or new technology emerges that allows DNA to be extracted from a sample that was previously considered useless. Or a similar crime occurs, connecting the scattered pieces of the puzzle." One of the serious problems the detectives faced was the changing testimony of key witnesses. Over time, their memories of the events of that night became less and less accurate, and sometimes were transformed by information received from the media or other people. "Human memory is unreliable," comments forensic psychologist Dr. Anita Green, who advised the Milton police. "A few years after an event, people often remember details that did not actually happen. This is not intentional lying, but a feature of how our brains work." For example, Gary Simmons, the witness who saw a suspicious pickup truck near Samantha's house on the night of Deborah's disappearance, changed his initial description in 2013. He now claimed that the car was not dark, but silver, and that there were two people behind the wheel, not one. "I'm sure I remember correctly now," he insisted during a second interrogation. "Over the years, the picture has become clearer in my memory. It was definitely a silver pickup truck, possibly a Ford F-150. Such changes in testimony further complicated an already difficult case. Detectives had to constantly assess which version of the witness's recollections was closer to the truth, the initial one, recorded immediately after the event, or the later one, possibly distorted by time and external influences. By 2015, 5 years after Deborah's disappearance, the hope of finding her alive had virtually disappeared. The Parker family organized a symbolic memorial service, although they did not officially recognize their daughter as deceased. "Without a body, without proof of death, we cannot hold a real funeral," explains James Parker. "But we needed some kind of closure, at least symbolic. We planted a tree in her honor in the park where she loved to walk. Every year on Deborah's birthday, we go there and tie blue ribbons on the branches. It was her favorite color." That same year, the FBI included the Deborah Parker case in a special program to investigate serial crimes. Agents compared the details of Deborah's disappearance with thousands of other unsolved crimes across the country, looking for similarities in the perpetrator's modus operandi, choice of victims, or circumstances of the disappearance. "We found 7 cases in the southeastern states between 2007 and 2016 that may be related," says FBI agent Jonathan Morrison. "In all cases, the victims were young women with brown hair. All of them disappeared in the evening or at night. In 5 cases, the victims' cars were found with signs of a possible struggle. However, no direct evidence linking these cases was found. The geographical spread of the crimes, from Virginia to Florida, made it difficult to find a suspect. Meanwhile, Milton was gradually returning to normal life. New families moved into town, unaware of its dark history. Children born after 2010 grew up without knowing about the girl whose disappearance had once shaken their community. Only the old-timers still locked their doors at night and treated strangers with suspicion. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it dulls the pain, says Margaret Parker. We've learned to live with this emptiness. We've learned to smile, work, and interact with people. But deep down, we're always waiting for a call that will tell us that our Deborah has finally been found. By 2020, 10 years after Deborah's disappearance, her story had become a legend, an urban myth told by Milton's teenagers. For most residents, she was no longer a real person, but a symbol, a reminder of the fragility of human life and the dark side of even the most idyllic communities. But for detectives Collins and Chen, for Deborah's parents and her closest friends, it remained an unfinished business, a wound that could not heal without the truth. They continued to search, hope, and wait, perhaps in vain. The spring of 2023 was rainy in Georgia. Continuous downpours delayed the start of construction on the new Milton Creek Mall on the outskirts of town, 5 kilometers from where Deborah Parker's car was found 13 years ago. The construction site, surrounded by a high fence with the developer's logos, remained empty for a long time. Heavy equipment was stuck in the rain-soaked ground. April was a nightmare, recalls construction foreman Ray Martinez. We were 3 weeks behind schedule. Management was pushing us, investors were nervous. When the dry weather finally set in at the beginning of May, I ordered 2 shifts to make up for lost time. On May 15th, when the excavator began digging the foundation pit for the future food court, operator Dwayne Ferguson noticed something strange in the excavated soil. At first, I thought it was animal bones, Ferguson says, nervously fingering his cap. Deer and boar remains are often found in these parts, but when I saw a jawbone with human teeth, I immediately turned off the engine and called the foreman. Construction work was immediately halted. Milton police cordoned off the area. An hour later, a team of forensic anthropologists from Atlanta, led by Dr. Carol Johnson, arrived on the scene. What we found was shocking even to experienced professionals, says Dr. Johnson, looking at photos from the excavation site. At a depth of about 3 meters, in a special soil pocket that protected the remains from complete decomposition, were the bones of 3 different people. They were neatly arranged side by side, almost ritually. Preliminary estimates suggest that the remains are those of young women buried at approximately the same time, between 10 and 15 years ago. The news spread instantly throughout Milton. By evening, a crowd had gathered at the construction site fence. Journalists, local residents, and, of course, the Parkers. James and Margaret stood silently, holding hands, watching as people in white coveralls slowly and methodically removed what could be the remains of their daughter from the ground. It's a strange feeling, almost hoping that the bones found belong to your child, Margaret admits, staring into space with empty eyes. We've been living in limbo for 13 years, not knowing if Deborah was alive, if she was suffering somewhere. Now there was a chance to find out the truth, to find some closure, and at the same time, it would mean losing hope for good. The process of identifying the remains took almost 2 weeks. The FBI's forensic laboratory in Quantico used the latest DNA analysis methods, including phenotyping and kinship matching technology. On May 29th, the results were officially announced. The remains belonged to Deborah Parker, Christine Ellis, and Ashley Donovan, 3 young women who disappeared in the Milton area and neighboring counties between 2007 and 2010. It was a moment of bittersweet triumph, recalls Detective Richard Collins, who continued to work on the case all these years, even after retiring in 2020. We finally found the girls, but at the same time, our worst fears were confirmed. All these years, we really were dealing with a serial killer. The first press conference after the remains were identified attracted an unprecedented number of journalists. The Fulton County Sheriff, the FBI spokesperson, and representatives of the families of all 3 victims spoke in front of dozens of cameras. Margaret Parker, who had aged noticeably over the years, struggled to hold back tears as she said, "We are grateful to everyone who has not forgotten Deborah all these years, who helped search, spread information, and supported us morally and materially. Now we know that our girl is no longer suffering. We will be able to bury her with dignity. But our struggle is not over. We want to know the truth. We want justice. While the press conference was going on, forensic experts kept carefully studying the remains and the place where they were found. Modern technology, much of which didn't exist or wasn't available in 2010, helped them get new info that investigators missed 13 years ago. We used scanning electron microscopy to analyze the microfibers found on the bones, explains Dr. Alicia Ramirez, lead forensic expert. This technology allows us to magnify the sample tens of thousands of times and determine its chemical composition. We found synthetic fibers of a very specific composition, used in the manufacture of a certain type of protective clothing worn by chemistry teachers during laboratory work. This discovery immediately caught the attention of investigators. The database of suspects compiled 13 years ago included several teachers, but none of them were chemistry teachers. The investigation took a new direction. An even more important find was a partial fingerprint preserved on a plastic button found among the remains. The button presumably belonged to the blouse Ashley Donovan was wearing on the day of her disappearance. In 2010, technology did not allow for the identification of such a fragmentary print, but modern matching algorithms were able to do so. Fingerprint recognition software has undergone several generations of improvements since the girls disappeared, comments FBI fingerprint specialist James Howe. Now we can reconstruct a complete print from a fragment that is only 20% of the whole and compare it to a database containing millions of samples. The print was uploaded to the FBI's Integrated Automated Fingerprint Identification System, IAFIS. The system returned several potential matches, which were then manually verified by experts. One of the matches had a particularly high probability rating of 96%. When I saw the name the system gave me, I couldn't believe my eyes, admits FBI agent Terrence Garcia, who was in charge of the reopened investigation. This man was never on the list of suspects. What's more, he was actively involved in the search for Deborah and other missing girls. He was part of a community that everyone trusted. Further analysis of the crime scene revealed another important detail. The remains were buried on a plot of land that belonged to the Fulton School District 13 years ago. The land was sold to developers only in 2021. The site had previously housed a storage facility for educational materials, which was accessible only to employees of the district's educational institutions. This information, combined with the microfibers and fingerprint found, allowed investigators to narrow down the list of suspects to a few people. A thorough review of their backgrounds, movements, and contacts with the victims began. We reviewed the personal files of all chemistry teachers who worked in the county between 2005 and 2010, said Detective Susan Chen. We checked their alibis for the dates of the girls' disappearances, analyzed phone calls, credit card purchases, and surveillance camera recordings that had miraculously been preserved in the archives. Gradually, all the suspects were eliminated from the list, except for one. Meanwhile, toxicology tests conducted on the victims' preserved tissue revealed the presence of a rare combination sedative used in veterinary medicine and accessible to teachers with the appropriate education. That was the last piece of the puzzle, says Fulton County District Attorney Daniel King. We had a clear picture of the killer, a person with a background in chemistry, access to rare drugs, familiarity with the area where the bodies were buried, and the ability to get close to the victims without arousing suspicion. A man whose fingerprint matched the one found on Ashley Donovan's button. On June 7, 2023, almost 13 years after Deborah Parker's disappearance, the Milton police obtained a warrant to search the suspect's home and arrest him. The operation was conducted in strict secrecy. Even the victims' families were not warned in advance. We were afraid of information leaks, explains Sheriff Jenkins. This man had been successfully hiding in plain sight for 13 years. The slightest warning could have caused him to disappear or destroy the evidence. At 6 o'clock in the morning on June 8th, a special capture team surrounded a small, neat house on Maple Street. The operation took less than 3 minutes. The suspect was arrested in his bed. He didn't even have time to understand what was happening. The news of his arrest shocked the entire city. No one, not even the most cynical investigators, could believe that a man whom everyone knew and respected could be responsible for such crimes. A search of the house confirmed the worst fears. In the basement, behind a false wall discovered with the help of thermal imaging cameras, a small room was found, carefully soundproofed. Inside was a collection of personal items belonging to the victims: Deborah's bracelet, Christina's earrings, Ashley's ring, photographs of the girls taken after their abduction, notebooks with detailed descriptions of the crimes, containers of chemicals identical to those found in the remains. "I've seen a lot of terrible things in my career," says FBI agent Martinez, one of the first to enter the secret room. But the way this man methodically, almost scientifically, documented his crimes was beyond comprehension, especially considering who he was to the community. When the suspect was led out of the house in handcuffs, a crowd gathered outside. Neighbors, colleagues, former students, all looked on in disbelief and horror. The man they had known for years, whom they had trusted with their children, turned out to be a monster who had been hiding among them all this time. The press conference at which the details of the arrest were officially announced drew a record audience. Sheriff Jenkins, visibly aged by years of investigation, looked both satisfied and devastated as he pronounced the name of the arrested man. This morning, Louis Mason, 49, a chemistry teacher at Milton High School, was arrested. The arrest of Louis Mason on June 8, 2023, was a blow from which Milton could not recover for several weeks. The 49-year-old chemistry teacher, who had worked at Milton High School for more than 20 years, was known to every resident of the city. A recipient of Teacher of the Year awards, head of the school science club, and a volunteer who raised the most money for the search for missing girls, Mason was the last person who could be suspected of such heinous crimes. "I couldn't believe it," recalls Teresa Green, principal of the school where Mason worked. "Louis was a model teacher. The kids adored him. Parents trusted him. I personally presented him with an award for outstanding contribution to education in 2020. And now I can't sleep at night thinking about how many times I left him alone with my students after class." The news of Mason's arrest spread like wildfire throughout the city. A crowd gathered outside the police station where he was taken after his arrest. Journalists, former students, shocked parents, and the simply curious. Many refused to believe the teacher was guilty even after the official police statement. "This is a mistake," someone in the crowd shouted. "They arrested the wrong person." "I've known Louis for 15 years, said another. "He's not capable of this." However, the evidence found in Mason's home left no room for doubt. A secret room discovered behind a false wall in the basement contained not only the victim's personal belongings and photographs, but also detailed diaries in which the chemistry teacher had meticulously documented his crimes. "What we found is beyond the comprehension of a normal person," said federal prosecutor Thomas Reed at a press conference. "These diaries are not just the notes of a criminal. They are a kind of scientific work, where the author analyzes his methods, improves them, and evaluates the results. He treated his victims as experimental specimens. During the investigation, it became clear that Mason was not just participating in the search for missing girls, he was one of the most active volunteers. He joined the search party for Deborah Parker the day after she disappeared, always arriving first and leaving last, suggesting new areas to search, far from the actual burial site. "He was with us the whole time," says James Parker, Deborah's father, unable to hide his tears. "He brought us casseroles when we were too grief-stricken to cook. He helped hang posters. He came to every anniversary of Deborah's disappearance. He even donated money to our fund. And all this time, he knew where our daughter was and what had happened to her." The trial of Louis Mason began in October 2023. The Fulton County courtroom could not accommodate everyone who wanted to attend. Hundreds of people gathered outside, watching the broadcast on large screens. National television channels broadcast live. The prosecution presented irrefutable evidence: Mason's DNA found on the victim's remains, his fingerprints on the girl's personal belongings, microfibers from his clothing, detailed diaries in which he described each crime, surveillance camera footage showing his car near the victim's disappearance sites on the relevant dates. But the real shock for those present came from the testimony that revealed the double life Mason had been leading all these years. He was a classic sociopath, Dr. Robert Phillips, a forensic psychiatrist, explained to the court. Highly functional, intellectually gifted, capable of perfectly imitating normal social behavior, but devoid of empathy. For such people, interacting with others is a game where they test the limits of their control and manipulation. Mason's ex-wife, who divorced him 2 years before the first murder, spoke of the strange behavior she had noticed in her former husband, collecting photographs of female students, unexplained absences at night, and a particular interest in cases of missing persons long before he himself began committing crimes. "I always felt that there was something wrong with him," she admitted, avoiding looking at her ex-husband. "But he was so charming, so intelligent. He knew how to make you doubt your own suspicions, make you think that the problem was with you, not him." One of the most shocking details emerged when it became known that Mason had maintained a close relationship with the Parker family after their daughter's disappearance. Not only did he participate in searches and memorial events, but he even became a member of the board of directors of their charitable foundation in 2015. "He offered to redesign our website to make it more effective for finding missing people," recalls Margaret Parker. "He spent hours with us, asking about Deborah, her habits, her hobbies, and we thought he just wanted to help. We invited him to Thanksgiving when we found out he would be alone. He sat at our table, ate our food, listened to our stories about Deborah, and all the while..." Sam Mason remained silent in court. He refused to testify or comment on the charges in any way. His lawyer chose a defense based on his client's insanity, but a forensic psychiatric examination found Mason to be fully sane and aware of the nature of his actions. On the 20th day of the trial, when the prosecution presented the contents of Mason's diaries, several jurors asked for a recess. They could not hold back their tears as they read the cold-blooded descriptions of the victim's suffering. "It was like a textbook," comments prosecutor Reed. He described methods of abduction, the use of chemicals to immobilize victims, experiments with various sedatives. All this was written in the language of a scientist observing an experiment, not a man taking the lives of young women. The photographs found in the secret room were particularly difficult for the victims' families to bear. The court decided not to show them publicly, but the descriptions read out in the courtroom caused a wave of outrage and grief. "I want you to look at these parents," Assistant District Attorney Janet Pierce said to the jury in her closing statement. "For 13 years, they lived in the hell of uncertainty. And all this time, there was a man next to them who knew the truth, who brought them food, hugged them, promised that we will find Deborah, who watched their suffering with the scientific interest of a psychopath, documenting their reactions in his diaries. Is there any punishment sufficient for such a crime?" The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, a record short time for a case of such complexity. The verdict was unanimous: guilty on all counts. On December 15, 2023, Louis Mason was sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Judge Elizabeth Howard, reading the sentence, did not hide her disgust. "In my judicial practice, I have seen many criminals, but rarely have I encountered a person whose actions demonstrated such a complete lack of humanity. You did not just take the lives of 3 young women with bright futures. You tormented their families and friends for years, playing the role of a sympathetic friend. This court believes that you pose an insurmountable threat to society and should never be released." As Mason was led out of the courtroom, Margaret Parker stood up and uttered a phrase that was later quoted in all the news reports: "Deborah can now rest in peace, and you will never have peace." On December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, a joint memorial service for the 3 victims was held in Milton's Central Park. Thousands of people came with white roses and candles. 3 marble benches with the names of Deborah, Christina, and Ashley were placed around a small fountain. "This story has changed our city forever," said the mayor of Milton in his speech. "We have lost our innocence, our trust, our sense of security. But we also gained something important, an understanding of how important it is to care for one another, to be attentive, not to turn away from the grief of others. These 3 young women will live on in our memory, and their story will serve as a warning to future generations." For the victims' families, the verdict brought a long-awaited but bitter conclusion. They could finally bury their daughters, hold real funerals instead of symbolic ceremonies, visit real graves instead of memorial trees in the park. "For 13 years, I woke up every morning thinking, 'Where is my girl?' says Margaret Parker, standing at her daughter's fresh grave. Now I know the answer. It's a terrible answer, but it's better than not knowing. Now I can begin to grieve for real. And maybe one day, I'll learn to live with this loss." Milton slowly returned to life after the shock. The school where Mason taught was temporarily closed for a security review and background checks on all staff. Many families changed their locks and installed security cameras. Parents learned to trust their children's teachers again. "We will never be the same," said the pastor of the local church in his Christmas sermon. "But perhaps we will become more attentive, more caring, more willing to notice the pain of others. Perhaps that is the lesson we all need to learn from this tragedy." The story of Deborah Parker, Christina Ellis, and Ashley Donovan did not end with their deaths or the arrest of their killer. It continued in the 3 Girls Act, passed by the Georgia General Assembly in 2024, which strengthened security measures in educational institutions and improved the system for searching for missing persons. It lives on in the work of the Deborah Parker Foundation, which now not only helps search for missing persons, but also provides psychological and legal support to their families.